everyone. We think we're getting set up. Just a second, we'll be right with you. Am I? Okay. Hi! Welcome to day 2 of Storytime with Miss Leah. And I am so excited. We're going to be reading a fairy tale today, or at least the first half of a fairy tale by Hans Christian Andersen. And the fairy tale is The Snow Queen. So we'll be reading the first half. We'll be starting that at 3 or a little after 3. So you are part of the pre-show if you're joining us live. So I have some things that I wanted to show. So I have something I got yesterday. I've got here, these are some buds from a magnolia tree. So I got these on our walk yesterday, and they are just about ready to burst into these beautiful pink and white flowers that'll be like, like the size of your hand. And so these are one of my favorite trees. I like the ones that are pink and white. We have one in our yard, but they're not the pink ones. So I got these and I put them in a jar because it should bloom just a little bit before the trees bloom, because inside it's a little bit warmer. So it tricks the twigs into thinking that it's already springtime. So one of the things I love about spring is watching all the signs of spring that start to pop up everywhere. And so I'm wondering if you guys have noticed anything that's different in the last week, because there's all sorts of new things happening outside. I've noticed the robins are back, and I've noticed that the tulips, the green parts of the tulips are up, and I've seen the crocuses. If you don't know what a crocus is, you should look it up. The crocuses are in bloom, and I've noticed some other birds, which I think tomorrow I will show you something we found on one of our walks. So tomorrow that will be something. And I also wanted to share with you guys a poem. This poem is from the book When We Were Very Young by A.A. Milne. If you were here yesterday, you might recognize that name, because that's the same guy who wrote the Winnie the Pooh stories in one of those that we read yesterday. So this story, or this poem, is called Knights and Ladies, and I'm going to read it here in a second. But I want to challenge you guys, as you're at home this week, next week, more than normal, and maybe you're a little bit bored, families, that there are ways to make life a little bit more exciting. One of them might be what I was talking about with noticing the changes outside, the signs of spring, and just marveling at creation and the things that God is doing. Don't let those slip by, because they only come once a year. And another thing might be right inside our heads, and we can use our imaginations. And so one of the things that I appreciate about this poet and another poet, Robert Louis Stevenson, which we'll probably be reading some of his poems too, is that it really takes the perspective of a child and uses a child's imagination and really captures what it's like to be a child and to have that active imagination. So here's this poem, Knights and Ladies. There is in my old picture book a page at which I like to look, where knights and squires come riding down the cobbles of some steep old town, and ladies from beneath the eaves flutter their bravest handkerchiefs, or smiling proudly toss down gauges. But that was in the Middle Ages. It wouldn't happen now, but still, whenever I look up the hill where dark against the green and blue the firs come marching two by two, I wonder if perhaps I might see suddenly a shining knight, winding his way from blue to green, exactly as it would have been those many, many years ago. Perhaps I might. You never know. So, I think it is 3 o'clock, and so we're going to go ahead and begin our story. Like I said, we're only going to read the first half today, so you'll have to join us tomorrow, and then we will finish it up, and we will find out what happens to the children in our story. This is called The Snow Queen. It's a fairy tale in 7 stories. The first story, The Shattered Mirror. A wicked imp made a mirror with a magic power to shrink anything good and beautiful, and enlarge everything bad and ugly. Even the nicest people who looked into it became so nasty you wouldn't recognize them. All their nice parts shrank away, and their worst ones grew larger. The imp thought this was the best fun ever. The other imps joined in, holding the mirror up to people and cackling at what they saw. Then the imps thought they would fly up to heaven and make fun of the angels. But the higher they flew, the harder it was to keep a hold of the mirror. Up and up they went until all at once the mirror shot out of their hands and crashed to earth, shattering into billions of pieces. This caused even more mischief than before, because many of the pieces were smaller than a grain of sand, and they landed all around the world. Each tiny fragment had the same power as the whole mirror, so when one got into a person's eye, that person only saw what was bad. If anyone got a little bit in their heart, that was really awful. Their hearts became like ice. The wicked imp laughed till his sides split. Second story, Kay and Gerda. 2 children, a boy named Kay and a girl named Gerda, lived next door to each other. They loved each other like brother and sister. They could step out of their bedroom windows into a little roof garden between their houses. There they read together on summer days, smelling beautiful roses. In winter, they played indoors. They would warm pennies by the stove, then press them on the frosted windows, making little peepholes to look out at the falling snow. One winter evening, Kay melted a hole in the window frost and saw a large snowflake fall. The snowflake grew and grew until Kay saw it was a lady, dressed in fine gauze made from millions of starry flakes. She was tall and pretty, yet was made of glittering ice. Her eyes were like bright, restless stars. She nodded to Kay, who was frightened, and turned away. A few days later, Kay and Gerda were looking at a book on their roof garden when Kay said, "Ouch! Something pricked me, and now I've got something in my eye." Gerda put her arm around him and looked closely while he blinked, but she couldn't see anything. "I think it's gone," said Kay, but it hadn't. Tiny splinters of glass from the wicked imp's mirror were in poor Kay's eye and his heart. "Why are you crying?" he asked Gerda impatiently. "It makes you look ugly. I'm fine now. There's nothing wrong." When Gerda turned back to the book, Kay said it was babyish. He had changed completely. The next day, Kay shouted to Gerda, "I'm off to sledge at the square with the older boys." And he was gone. While the boys were sledging, a big white sleigh drove into the town square. Inside was a person wrapped in a white fur cloak and cap. The boys tied their sledges to the sleigh to be pulled along, and Kay joined in. Faster and faster they went, the driver turning round and giving Kay a nod, as if they knew each other. Then the other boys tumbled away, and the sleigh sped out through the city gates. Kay tried to untie his sledge, but it was knotted tight and traveling like the wind. Snow fell so fast that he couldn't see. He shouted, but the sleigh went racing on. Then all at once the sleigh stopped, and the driver stepped out. It was a lady, tall, straight, and gleaming white, the Snow Queen he had seen from the window. "Why, you're cold," she said. "Come wrap yourself in my bearskin cloak." She sat Kay beside her in the big white sleigh and put her cloak around him. It felt like sinking into a snowdrift. She kissed him on the forehead. Her kiss was colder than ice. He forgot Gerda and everyone at home. They flew over snowy woods and lakes, over cold seas and lands. Up above, the moon shone clear, and Kay watched it all the long winter's night. The third story. An old magic woman. Spring came at last. "Kay must be dead," said Gerda to the swallows. "We don't think so," they replied. Gerda put on her new red shoes and went down the river. "Have you taken my playmate Kay?" she asked. "I'll give you my new shoes if you bring him back to me." So she threw her shoes into the river, but they floated straight back. She thought perhaps she hadn't thrown them far enough, so she stepped into a boat and got further from the bank. The boat wasn't tied up, and it started to float off. Gerda was a little frightened, but thought, perhaps the river will take me to Kay. She came to an odd little house with 2 wooden soldiers outside. An old woman stepped out, leaning on a crooked stick. "You poor child, drifting away," said the old woman. She hooked the boat with her stick and pulled it to the shore. Gerda told her story and asked the old woman whether she had seen Kay. The woman said no, and gave her some cherries to cheer her up. This old woman could do magic. She wasn't a wicked witch, but she had always longed for a little girl, and she wanted to keep Gerda with her. She combed Gerda's hair with a golden comb until the girl forgot all about Kay and all about her home. The old woman had a lovely garden with an especially beautiful rose bush. Gerda spent hours in the garden. One day, after she had lived in the odd house for a while, she was sitting by the rose bush smelling its scent, and she suddenly thought of the roses in the roof garden at home, and she remembered Kay. "Do you think he's dead?" she asked the roses. "He isn't," they replied. And then Gerda ran out of the garden gate into the wide world. "It's autumn already. I have lost so much time," she cried. "I must." And it's time for us to end for today, so you'll have to come back tomorrow to find out what happens to Kay and to Gerda. And I want you guys to think about in this story, what did the mirror do? How did it change Kay and Gerda? And why are they both lost? And how will they find each other? I hope you guys are having a great day. I got outside today with my girls and jumped in some puddles, and it was really fun. So if you have some mud puddles around your house, maybe you could put on some rain boots or just clothes you can get wet and go outside. Only take a few minutes. Find a puddle, jump in it, do some crazy, crazy spinning and jumping and get all wet, and then clean yourself up and get warm with a cup of hot chocolate. Have a great day. Bye-bye.